We're here on site at the Engineering Leadership Conference here in San Francisco, meeting with over 120 engineering leaders, including our friends at Expedia, showcasing their squads framework that they built on the Linear B platform.
Yeah, we'll have that episode coming out here in a few weeks for all of our listeners. It's a really great one, I think. We've been sitting down with a lot of engineering leaders here in the Dome at this event. A lot of episodes getting recorded that you all are going to hear in the upcoming weeks. So, yeah, stay tuned. Lots of good content upcoming. Been a really great event, Andrew. And, I really feel like the whole tone of this event was set like the very first morning, like the first conversation I had. I had these two engineering managers walked up, had barely finished my first cup of coffee, and had a really wonderful conversation with them. But it all started when they first like picked up a couple of our affirmation cards that we've been showing off, which have been like a real hit here. That like now like word of mouth has gotten around and like people are seeking them out. But I'm curious, like we've got a whole bunch of them that we're handing out, and like a lot of them have jokes on them. Like, what's your favorite affirmation that we've been handing out
Oh yeah.
here?
I love these affirmations. They were fun to make. My favorite one is this PR was approved in a past life.
Yeah,
That was
probably by AI, right? Past AI
yeah.
life.
I love that one. What about you? What was your favorite?
Yeah, so actually, I think it was the very first one that I wrote like years ago that we're still rocking on one of our cards out there. And that is, I'm comfortable giving and receiving feedback using only the letters LGTM.
Yeah, they've been a real hit. A lot of people have come and built their own decks and walked away with them, so it's been
Yeah,
real fun.
yeah, and it's fun, seeing some people pick from one of our piles, some people just pick at random, some people pick one that's already been revealed. It's a lot of fun, and we're just trying to make AI, developer productivity, developer experience fun for everyone. So, but yeah, so I'm having this conversation with these two engineering managers, and we're cracking jokes over affirmations and striking up conversation. And naturally, in 2025, anytime you talk to somebody in tech, it always ends up coming down to AI. Like eventually you're going to start talking about AI. And they told me they've done what everyone's doing these days. Like they've adopted all the tools. They've got Copilot, they've got Cursor, Claude Code, Windsurf. Like they had a laundry list that they just kind of listed off. And I was like, wow, you guys are doing it all. And they even told me they had like bought some like dashboard from one of the vendors here to like measure it all. And, is paying a lot of money for it, got all these pretty visualizations, but they were like almost distraught over it. And, they're like, there's this AI everywhere. Like we have it all over our booth even, but it's all over all the booths. The event itself makes AI like really a central component of the entire experience. And, they were kind of distraught about how like they had all these tools, they had all these metrics, these dashboards, but they still felt stuck. Like they weren't actually sure if they were making the right decisions and if productivity was getting better and if their developers were actually being more effective, being more efficient, producing higher quality. In fact, they were actually starting to like experience some backlash from some of their developers, and particularly over one of the metrics that their executives had started to really get stuck on was PR throughput. Like that was they saw that dashboard and they were like, "Ooh, can we make that number go up?" And naturally, the developers are like, "Why do we need more PRs? Like, is that really the thing that we should incentivize?" And even the engineering managers are, they're a little skeptical of that metric as well. And personally, me, like I immediately just sort of cringed a little bit because I once worked on an engineering team that we had two North Star metrics. It was the number of commits that we created and the number of lines of code that we changed. So, naturally we just wrote some scripts to make those two metrics go up. And sure enough, these two engineering managers, they even described a recent conversation they had with their engineering team where it was getting a little fraught, and the engineers were wondering why they were so focused on these metrics. And the engineering manager just had to say, look, if our executives are so focused on this one metric, PR throughput, and you have these AI tools, you guys know how to make that metric. You can use AI to make more PRs. Like, look, you can just do it. Like, I know it's not the thing that's going to be best for all of us, but you can just do it. Like, there's nothing stopping you. And I felt so bad for them, honestly. Like, that's not what you want to do to your team. Like, that's not the kind of relationship you want to have. It's not healthy. That's not going to be productive. But it's a common refrain we hear. A lot of these organizations, they like really never make it past that like measurement phase of the developer productivity journey. and they like buy this dashboard, they get a framework, and the execs might think that's enough, but the reality is that you've really just barely even made the first step at that point. And if you don't take action, if you don't realize, if you don't take any steps to improve upon the things that you're measuring, then you're never going to realize the full potential of AI. And I think that's a theme that we're seeing like time and time again here, not only at this event, but it is coming up a lot here, and elsewhere. And we're obviously here with Linear B. We have the Dev Interrupted DOM. Linear B is also here with their booth, showing off a lot of the cool new features. But what I really love is particularly with Linear B, is they're not here to just like show you how to measure AI and be done with it. Like we're really focused on how to get better with AI. So, as a part of this, Linear B has announced a bunch of new features around it. So, like, we've got the AI code reviews that are doing really awesome, especially in like head-to-head comparisons against like all the tools that are out there, like Copilot. Because you think about code reviews are one of the most common bottlenecks in the SDLC. So, like, really giving practical improvements to dev teams. We also they announced the new MCP server that just generates helpful artifacts to help you make decisions. Like, it's a new way to consume data within teams, and it's almost like an evolution going beyond like metrics and dashboards. Now you have like this companion that helps you make sense of your reality. But then things like developer surveys to help uncover pain points in the AI journey. And then, of course, AI dashboards. Like, after you've made improvement, you do need something that proves that you've made those improvements. So, rather than it being like metrics being the first step, I think that's one of the things that, us here at Dev Interrupted, but also Linear B, I think really makes a point, is that metrics aren't the answer. They're the proof after you found the answer, So, but yeah, it's been a really fun event so far, and we've had a lot of conversations like that. So, but I think if I had to really like summarize where I feel like the zeitgeist is today, and that is, there's so much hype in the AI space. I think we are beginning to transition out of things being purely forward looking. Like, everyone's going beyond just like what will the world look like 2 years from now. There's still lots of that, of course, but there's a lot more now of here's what we have done and are doing, and here are the practical changes that are happening now, and here's how that's going to change the world in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So it's really starting, like, AI is really starting to show up in the real world, not just be some like futuristic thing that we're all waiting to show up in the tomorrow.
Yeah. It's a really powerful anecdote you shared from those engineering managers who came up and talked with you, because across the conference, I think a prevailing theme has been that AI is a force multiplier for the things that are happening within your organization. So if you value things like DevOps and really strong process and quality, then AI can help magnify that. Like, we just heard an amazing talk from Natalie Glean, the chief engineering officer at Duolingo, who talked about how they harness AI as a force multiplier in order to create more content quickly without reducing quality. And that's like the real key, is that balancing that quantity with the quality is how you achieve really great success within your team. And you can actually use it as like a force of change within your engineering org. And that's like a prevailing thing I'm seeing and hearing from a lot of the talks here. I think every single backdrop has the letters AI on it somewhere. Everyone here is talking about it and what it means to build incrementally. I think that's a really good call out that you made, that there's less of the nebulous look forward. What does it look like in X years? And it's more about, what does it look like right now within our organizations? We've all been tangling with it for a year. What's happened after all of that? And are we upside down? Are we actually better off? And I think those are real conversations happening within all of these engineering orgs that are here. So it's amazing to all come together and share those insights with each other.
Yep. Yep. So, of course, not everything is happening here in San Francisco at ELC. There is the rest of the world happening, and there are other stories out there that, of course, we want to cover while we're here too. So let's get into some of the news stories, Andrew. So what's our first story that we had today?
Yeah, so along the same theme, we read an article from Ankit Jain. This is at Aviator, about throwing AI at developers and about how it doesn't really fix their problems. And this is a prevailing idea of something you just talked about, something that is really encountering a lot of engineers within their organization right now, that bottlenecks and problems within your org, they don't go away when you add AI. In fact, AI will magnify those problems. And so this article breaks down kind of a flipping the script on how you think about some of the ways that you would utilize AI. So like one that stood out to me is that complexity can never be removed. It can only be abstracted. So when you use AI to make a process more simple, it doesn't mean that all the complexity is no longer happening. It's just happening in a place where maybe you're not seeing it as much or you don't have as much touch on it. And that's what saves you time. But it's not good to save you time if you lose the quality and the exact like what you're trying to achieve with that actual process. And so it really dives into like why it's important to understand under the hood what's happening within your AI workflows and goes back to things we talked about on Dev Interrupted, like the power of evals, making sure things stay on the rails. I think it was really interesting to see how it kind of like laid these top level points for why it's a force multiplier.
Yeah, there was a line in this that really stuck with me that has actually come up with a few times. Actually, just in these couple days we've been here, and that was, don't just pick a tool, pick a problem. Right? Like you should always approach AI from solving something that your organization is facing. You know, if you buy a tool and then search for a problem, you're probably going to misapply AI, or even worse, you may find yourself going in the wrong direction using AI. And in fact, I spoke with John Amaral while we were here, and that episode will be coming out in coming weeks. And he brought up a very, very similar point. And his company is doing some really, really cool things with AI and actually productizing it. And he made that exact same point, that when they were using AI to build a product, he was very focused on finding the problem and then figuring out how AI can be applied to that problem. So yeah, definitely check this article out. Ankit, I met him in the past. Really smart individual, so it's definitely worth checking this article out. So yeah, what's next? I think we have an article from OpenAI about hallucinations.
Oh, yeah. So this has been a really interesting one to follow. OpenAI released a blog post building on a research paper that they did about why language models hallucinate in the first place. And if you've been working with large language models, like many of us have, you know that the hallucinations are actually more like a feature, right? When we call things hallucinations, the idea is that it's a plausible guess within the realm of what could be true, but is actually not grounded in reality. And what we deem as a hallucination from the machine is actually a common occurrence that we do all the time as language interfacing things, right? And so the way that we build these systems and then evaluate them actually has a lot of similarities with how we build our own knowledge and how we test that knowledge. So this paper from OpenAI dives into the provenance of hallucinations and why they occur. And it really dives into that they're actually more things that are reinforced through like post-training as part of the process of creating a model and bringing it to market. And it's a thing that happens because of how the models are incentivized. And there was a really great post that we saw from recent guest, Dr. Tatiana Mahmood, who came on Dev Interrupted earlier this year to talk about the sycophancy within AI, where, we all know this experience where you're told you're absolutely right when you're absolutely wrong. And this behavior, it stems from, of course, the way that the models are post-trained and evaluated after they've been fine-tuned, right? And so she calls out rightly that it's just like on the SATs, how students are penalized for leaving a question blank. These evals put these AIs on rails to where they're always pressured to make some sort of answer, even if it's not true. And this is what ultimately ends up kind of bubbling up these hallucinations in these experiences that we have, because we tell the LLM to be right, to be certain, to be confident, and that's the same thing that it's tested in that same language in a post eval, right? And it's put to task. It has to make a guess. If it leaves it blank, it knows it got it wrong. If it makes a guess, at least it's maybe 1 out of 4 chance. And so this is just like how humans work. And so ultimately, the incentives for what will make AI more truthful are the same incentives that make humans better capable of synthesizing thoughts. And this means that don't just rely on binary results. Yes, no, is it true, is it false? Have them write short responses, essays, avoid the weasel words, and actually figure out what it is that you're trying to do and say. And that's the mark of a highly intelligent person who can convey their thoughts. And that's the road we have to go down with LLMs to get them there too.
Yeah, one of the examples they included was, if you ask a model to tell you or to say when someone's birthday is and it doesn't know, and it might take a guess, and maybe it guesses the month right, but it gets the day wrong, and that gives it a partially correct answer. It would rather do that than say I don't know, because that is 100% wrong.
Right.
So that incentive model encourages it to get that partially correct answer, and it's going to say that partially correct answer just as if it was a 100% correct answer. So that's, and as you mentioned, part of the issue with hallucinations is that variability is actually what makes probabilistic tools like LLMs valuable,
Right.
because it gives you some level of adaptability. um and so I think a lot of people who are working on improving these models do believe that hallucinations, um, if they're not completely fixed over time, they will get much better. We'll get better at solving it, at reducing the impact of them. Something else to consider is, if you're operating in a space where this does cause problems for you, you can also find ways to implement deterministic checks to sort of mitigate the risks for that. So, particularly with, just coding as a great example, like, code is, it's a language, like, any language. You can arrange words in many different ways and say the same thing. Like, I could take very different words, write two sentences in completely different ways, but have them basically convey the exact same meaning.
Right.
Code is sort of the same way. But one of the big benefits of code is that you can often then use some level of deterministic system to validate that it's performing exactly as you would expect it to. So there are ways you can design systems to leverage the benefits of, like, the probabilistic nature of LLMs while still having, like, that deterministic check that makes sure that they aren't going to negatively impact whatever you're building them into. So yeah, so if you want to understand a little bit about why hallucinations exist and why it's a problem and what the companies that are building this stuff are doing, this is definitely an article that you should check out.
Absolutely.
All right, so our last one is filed firmly into things that I don't think any of us knew that we needed, but here it is today, and now we all get to live with it. So what's our last story for the day, Andrew?
This is my favorite one. So we've covered Geoffrey Huntley and all of his work, vibe coding, and how he uses things like Cursor and Claude Code and then AMP to build things that he never possibly could have built before. And the way that he thinks about using these tools is so optimistic and just so cavalier that I'm just always constantly plugged in to what he's
Yeah.
working on.
I,
So
I think if there was a vibe coding Olympics, I think Huntley would be, like, the best vibe coder,
he's
like,
at the
maybe
top.
in the world right
Yeah,
now. Like,
he has been at the top of some charts, maybe to his chagrin. But
yeah.
I will say that the work that he does is really interesting, and we're going to cover one of them right now. So he's been working all this year. Well, Claude has been working mostly to create a new programming language, a C compatible standard lib, using only Gen Z slang. So what this means is that he used C, or to write basically a compiler in a new language. And then once he wrote enough of that language in that new language, he then used this cursed language, is what he calls it, to write itself. And in this process, what he did is he unveiled that you can really kind of do anything now within software engineering. And he really kind of breaks down this falsehood that a software engineer's skills will atrophy in this world of AI, because he's somebody who never had the curiosity before to even want to build a compiler or understand how they worked. But because he was enabled by these tools, he was able to work with Claude on a loop, running a very simple prompt to incrementally create a Golang-like programming language using only Gen Z slang. And the lexical structure of this is amazing. He released this website that we'll include in our newsletter, so you can go and check out how you could use this language to write your own functions. And what ends up happening is every single declarative word that you would imagine writing a program with has been literally replaced with Gen Z slang. So I'm going to call out some of them that are really funny to me. For example, you declare a function with slay. So you would say like slay add as like a way of declaring a function. Another one that's really funny is when you return, you don't say return, you say damn. That's pretty good. And then of course you have of course like working with things like true and false. True is based and cringed is false, of course. And of my absolute favorite is doing a comment block. You know, every language has it different. Maybe it's a double backslash, maybe it's a backslash and then an asterisk. No, in cursed language, a line comment is FR. So for those listening that don't know what that means, it means it's literally saying for real, for real. And if you want to do a block comment, well, you open with no cap and you end with on God. It's hilarious. And it's something that I didn't think the world needed until I saw this website. And honestly, I'm going to probably sit down in the saddle and try to write something with this language. He calls it cursed. It is literally cursed. It is the cursed Gen Z language. And he also made the joke that he cursed at Claude a whole bunch while it was
I
building
can
it.
imagine. And
What do
of
you
course,
think? What do you think about this one?
well, of course, we had to consult with our resident Gen Z slang consultant,
Yes.
producer Adam. He's the only way we could make sense of this. Although once you know the slang, it is a surprisingly readable language, which is really phenomenal. I'm going to list off some of my favorites. So to import a package, yeet. That's brilliant. Like I feel like that should be what JavaScript changes their import
I
to.
feel like
Like,
yeet should be like export. It'd be like, I'm done with it. Yeet.
yeah.
But I like it.
A constant is facts. That's a great
That
one.
is a good one.
To break, ghosted. An int is a normie. Man, there's just so many. Like you really have to go check out the cursed website to go see all of the incredible ones. And if you haven't seen Huntley doing this vibe coding, he actually does it while he sleeps, which is the best part. Like
Yeah.
it live streams on YouTube. He's got all of his agents just like hacking away as he sleeps. He's Australian, so it's like during our daytime, he's at home sleeping, and like I'll just have it like casually playing while I'm working some days, and like I'm like, man, this guy's working 24/7, you know, like it's kind of incredible.
It's amazing. And then, you know, he'll wake up and he'll see the work that it did and he'll review it. And it's
Yeah,
amazing, actually, if you go to the repository where he's been building this language, the amount of incremental work and all of the artifacts of production
yeah,
that have been created by him and the LLM through this whole process. I have extracted so many techniques that I use all the
yeah,
time from how Huntley does this. And the last thing I'll leave y'all with is on the website, we'll include, there's a whole bunch of leak code examples. So you can actually go read full leak code functions of common things people are asked to do in programming languages, like determining the maximum depth of a binary tree using only the cursed language. So definitely be sure to check this out. And we would love to see if you write anything in this.
yeah. And I want to just point out that I think what this really illustrates is the brilliance of when you construct an AI agentic system with all the context it needs, with the structure, with the tooling that it needs, how simple the capability actually becomes. Because you know, like this is not a serious, like he's not gonna like. This is not like a thing that's going to get deployed into some high production system that is like,
Well,
okay, maybe we'll see. Who knows? But you know, so he sets this whole thing up and then gives it like the most simple prompt, which is the most incredible part of this. You know, it's for 3 months. He says his agents had the simple goal: produce me a Gen Z compiler. You can implement anything you like. That's it. That's all he told it to do. And here we are 3 months later. Like that's really a pretty extraordinary thing. And I think this will be a case study in how vibe coding, this type of work, happens in the future. So
it's going to be a
you know,
case study. It's going to be a full
yeah.
conversation. We're definitely have to get him in the seat here to talk about it.
Yeah. Stay tuned. I have high hopes that he'll be a guest on our show soon enough, and we'll definitely get to pick his brain on how all of this works. So, yeah. So
Amazing. Well, you know, those are our stories for the week here at ELC. There's just so many insights that we're extracting. We're going to keep talking about them week after week as we drop the amazing episodes that we've been recording here on site. Today, we're diving into a really cool topic. We're exploring the world of specialized intelligence and the challenges of bridging research and product development. And we're doing this with Elizabeth Lingg. She's the Director of Applied Research at Contextual AI. That's the team behind RAG. And ultimately, Elizabeth's impressive background spans major players like Microsoft and Apple. She brings a unique scientific perspective to making AI work for real-world applications. Elizabeth, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to chat.
we're excited to dive into your research background. We have so many cool questions that we can learn from someone of your background. And I wanted to start just by talking a little bit about your career, because it's taken you through some impressive places that I just named. And it all started with you for a love of learning, and what does it look like as an applied researcher on a software team?
Yeah, so I would say that I've always been passionate about math, AI. Even as a kid, I read 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I was so fascinated by the book and whether, Hal had a software hardware malfunction. Did he achieve singularity? Um, when he ejected the person from the spacecraft, what happens with intelligence with AI? So I've always loved AI and the research side. For the longest time, math, statistics, data science, it's always been a passion. But then how do you actually bring that into a product? How do you build something that works for, real users, real customer data? So that basically is where my career has taken me to actually apply the research, apply the ML model, and build real and exciting products.
So your journey starts by becoming a researcher, someone who's obsessed and great at science and math, and that lets you go, deep on like an academic type of route of learning how to conduct research and collect great data. And then from there, how did you look to pivot those research skills to become an engineering leader?
Sure. So I think just the fact that I joined industry after grad school at Stanford, I ended up, working on different aspects of the code. So not just, say, clustering and similarity algorithms, but also information retrieval, building my own Lucene frameworks, which and calling different, APIs, external APIs, and so forth, which brought me into a lot of this software side of as well. Of course, for anyone with a computer science degree, you do learn the fundamentals in different areas. But even though my job title was on the ML side, I'm still touching all these different aspects of the system, and I'm working with the DevOps team, and I'm um, working to train a model on a server on specific compute. So I think what happened is once I joined the real world, I have to build these products. I have to make sure the customers are happy. Then I start worrying about things like latency, right? So even 16 years ago after grad school, latency was a thing. So I was working on governance, risk and compliance, and fraud detection, and using AI for that. But even for that, if it's too slow, the customer's going to be unhappy. So that's what brought me into the software side of things. And then honestly, it's been the best fit for me. I realized that even though my greatest passion is on the research, AI, and math side, it's really good to have those solid computer science fundamentals as well, and at least have an understanding of code. Of course, you can vibe code these days, but you have to have the understanding of the system. Having that full understanding, I think, is really valuable. And what I've noticed is the industry has shifted. Like when I first joined, you either pitch you're an AI researcher or you're a software engineer. You're a data scientist, you're a software engineer. But these days, it's very common to have the full stack MLE, applied scientist, applied researcher, and which works out great for me. I think it is important to have that full perspective.
Yeah, that's a great call out that you've made there, about the diversification of the skills and the baseline that folks are expected to operate at. We're hearing that from everybody. We talked with Lee Robinson, VP product at Vercel, echoed the same thing happening in web development, where you have like the full collapse of front end and back end into this
Mhm.
full stack engineer that's a baseline now. That's table stakes as someone working in that environment. And you see the same thing happening. We talked with a guest from Google DeepMind who talked about how most engineers and how engineering's work. It's a collapse of back end, front end. It's not that specialists go away. It's just that the expectation level and that everyone's supposed to be operating at shifts. And there was something else that you said in there too that I really like. I want to double click on. And you said when I entered the real world, when you went from doing the theoretical work to working in the practical application world, what was a big challenge you faced when you made that transition?
Yeah, yes, it was surprising. I think anyone who goes from the academic world to a more of a production environment to learn about all the basically all the failure cases that exist and inner team dependencies. And to your point, I mean, yes, specialists still exist. They're great. I love specialists. It hasn't been obviously my trend in my career per se, but it is the baseline. You do, even if you're a specialist, you do have to have that baseline understanding. And so I think what was shocking to me is just at first, once I was getting to know how to build, software and cloud software and applications and so forth. And eventually SaaS is like, okay, there's still much that goes into it. I always thought in academia, the research is very hard. It is. It's a very challenging aspect to it. But it's surprising to see how much you have to adapt that research to really put into production, work with multiple teams in multiple disciplines.
Yeah, and especially when you work at, like, a large company like Apple and Microsoft that has a bunch of teams, has a bunch of disciplines, it's a huge spread out organization. What was it like shifting from working in that kind of environment to being an applied researcher and working in a more startup-like environment?
Sure. So my trend over my career has actually been either startups or sort of the startups within the large companies. So I have been a part of, several early stage startups or like startups that are quickly acquired by a big guy kind of thing. And I think what I love about it is for both of those situations is the ability to really contribute to the research community to be scrappy and move quickly. For example, at Microsoft, I was most recently working on the Copilot team and leading the language understanding for the Office Copilot. And in that role, we started with a hackathon, and then 8 months later, we had to deliver an entirely new product, which you think would be easy in a large company, but large companies also have their downside. They have their processes. So that
Right.
was really exciting getting there and getting to that, you know, um, large number of customers and large sales number and moving to GA in just 8 months. So I always love both within the startup and the large company, trying something new, working on risky teams. And then I would say at startups, though, it's the best growth and learning. I see so many people, especially in the AI community, attracted to startups because you wear so many hats, you touch so many things, you learn a lot, you challenge yourself. And then certainly at large companies on the right team, there's a lot of learning and growth as well.
And when you're on those teams and you're working on applied research within an organization like that, how do you measure your impact and how productive y'all are as a team together?
Sure. So that's an interesting question is always measurement and metrics, which, as one knows, can be biased, right? So you may measure accuracy, but you have one perspective. Someone on the other side of the world or coming from a different culture may have a different definition of accuracy or golden labels or what is a representative data set? Is it the data on the internet? Probably not. We've read the stochastic parrots paper, but bottom line is, I would say we do try to quantify measurements, typically like accuracy and so forth, or say for retrieval, NDCG, MRR, recall, precision, all that kind of thing. And then we try to, with like large language models, we measure groundedness, equivalence. Um, Contextual has a really cool methodology called LM unit, which I could tell you more about, which runs software engineering unit tests to verify criteria. So we have all these, at Microsoft and at startups, we do have these quantitative, and at large companies like Apple, we do have quantitative measures, which we use. And we try to diversify those metrics. That's always my goal, to avoid bias. So get perspectives from different people, aggregate different metrics together, try to balance out, the bias in the data set, have a holdout data set. That's one way to measure success. But the biggest measurement of customer success is always like, I would say always like customer utilization, customer satisfaction. So one thing we've worked on doing is correlating our what we call our inner loop metrics with outer loop metrics. So how many queries per day? How often are people using the app? You can correlate that with, for example, you can see if there's a correlation with some of our internal metrics in terms of recall for retrieval. Is there, can you apply a linear regression and do you see that there's a correlation there? What features should be weighted higher or lower? in order to determine how the inner loop influences the outer loop. So we do some of that quantitative work. And then what's interesting with what I've seen at certain companies is there's a lot of like vibe check and user experience. So even Apple, I think, is really good at that. Like Apple is not historically been like the AI data company, but for example, they're really good at like building these really cool, engaging products and really beautiful products and making data beautiful and making AI like the excitement of using AI when I worked on the Apple Health team, for example, on your phone, on your watch. So
Yeah.
I would say there's both the quantitative and the qualitative metric, and they both matter. And for both of those, you have to be very careful to avoid bias.
It's really helpful to understand how you walk through the process of evaluating your own work and looking at it when it's actually applied at scale and inside of applications and those things that you look for, the signals from the end users, on is this good, is this bad, but also just internally your methodology for making sure everything stays grounded because that's why you're there. And for those listening, they might see a lot of things related with this kind of mentality with their own kind of mini startup groups and cultures within their orgs right now, because everyone's experimenting with this kind of technology, and they're trying to be grounded and methodological about how they approach it, right? And I'm wondering, from your perspective, how can a leader foster that kind of culture of grounded research and innovation at their own company?
Yeah, so definitely at Contextual, for example, we're very much focused on groundedness and accuracy. There was an article that came out that said this startup, showed that they beat GPT 4.0 on this accuracy benchmark. So the reason why is for a lot of enterprise use cases, it's very important that you're grounded in the retrieved knowledge, in the specific knowledge, and there's not hallucinations based on the model's base knowledge. So that is one thing you can foster is like if the company's goal is enterprise customers who need to be grounded, who need to be accurate. That's just such a big need, I think, right now in the community and in AI. Then that's something you should focus on because that's what's important to your users. On the contrary, if you're like a consumer company like artificial general intelligence, the OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., who's looking at the consumer market versus enterprise, you might be more lenient on creativity versus accuracy, but just not important to your users. So you do always have to be like customer first and user base in mind. But even then, and this is something I learned across my career at different companies, you also just have to try to seek the viewpoints and the external metrics, and try to understand from like diverse team members how to avoid bias. So like large companies, what's great is they have RAI, but even there are even tools around this. There's models which will tell you if something is offensive, or they'll be sure to be careful about RAI, the llama guard type model,
Yeah.
especially. Yeah, yeah. So and then prompt shield and so forth. So there's things you can do whether you have the resources of a large company and have a whole team around it, or you're using one of the open source models. But I would say that's important to just have like try to have a broader perspective or make use of tools that can kind of give you a new sense of awareness. And then I would say definitely use multiple metrics. That's another thing. And then the final thing is just beyond all that, don't forget the vibe check. Don't forget the actual user experience. What is it really like to use it? Even having humans red team it, tell you what they think. That's invaluable.
I like what you're calling out at the end of the vibe check aspect. It actually reminds me of the recent memo that came out from OpenAI about their own model releases around sycophancy, because they use that language vibe check as part of their review process that maybe didn't ultimately pass the right test. It was if you remember the memo, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It was very much about how the LLM responses you would get would say what you wanted to hear, as opposed to being grounded in truth or having a reasonable response, having those safeguards. Are you familiar with that memo that they dropped? That's what I think of when I hear you describe that topic.
Yes, yes, but this is, I mean, human preference-based alignment is a whole research area. In fact, we have in my company, we have a lot of researchers who are collaborating with Stanford. And that's one of the dangers uh, with, you know, RLHF and reinforcement learning and any kind of human preference alignment through thumbs up, thumbs down. It people have their own bias, like, they wanna
Right.
be told what they want to hear, but that's also dangerous, right? So that's why you do have to balance it out. You don't wanna just rely on that, sycophancy, like, or you want to maybe have some vibe check to counter that, that's one thing. Or you could use another metric, like I mentioned, we have a model that measures groundedness to say how accurate our data how grounded, the responses are in the retrieved knowledge, how accurate they are. So those are different, methodologies you can use to balance it out. But that's why you need those multiple metrics because you don't wanna just optimize for making the user happy. I know before I mentioned that was the ultimate metric, but it's not their happiness is just not being told what they wanna hear, like, enterprise users also want something accurate, and even consumer users, like, there's a good number of consumer users who will be angry if they're told something inaccurate. So you
Yeah.
just have to have a broader perspective on that.
Yeah, it absolutely depends on the reason to which you turn to the tool, right? It goes back to what you've rightfully called out about the usage of generalized models versus specialized models, understanding what and why you need to be using the tool that you are for the stakes of your company or your product or what you're putting out there. So, it in your kind of environment, you know, you spend a lot of time thinking about the specialized intelligence and how do we create it in a way that is grounded in the facts and truths of our org and our live data and the things that matter to that agent doing that workflow. What are some things that you see working in specialized intelligence that just off the shelf models just can't do that maybe folks are missing if they never look deeper?
Yeah, I would say, what folks are missing with off-the-shelf models is even with them, there's just a lot of effort, even so, to make a specialized use case work. Like, if you look at some of our customers working on, technical documentation, code gen for not just general code gen, but code gen for their libraries, their specialized use case, hardware configurations, customer support for electrical engineers, like, really experts or another, customers in the tax and legal space, like experts in, uh different, regions, for example, there's different tax laws, and then so out of box, you could get a certain thing, but a lot of organizations, they have their own internal data, they have their own internal knowledge base, right? And so I think what's missing is it's not so easy to just throw all that into context or set up a RAG platform and use the foundation model. It takes a lot of, human effort and work, like, you have to start data cleaning, rewrite per generation, and so a lot of what the value proposition of what my company is doing is making that a lot easier to spin up these specialized agents very quickly by having all these components, document understanding, parsing, re-ranking, generation, retrieval models, etcetera, and the ability to specialize them. And also evaluate for groundedness and so forth, and so having that all together and having that acceleration within a product and a platform is definitely, something that I think is much needed, because otherwise you set up one use case, you spend a long time, and then this new use case comes, and it's, like, back to ground zero, and I know there's a lot of companies doing that. A lot of companies are just they're just they have this customer, and then they have a bunch of folks, like, set it up, make it work, and then they're back to ground zero for customer number 2, number 3. It's still a good business model, but our goal is to make that much easier, and so I think what's missed there is not having the state-of-the-art components and modular components that you could use and quickly stitch something together, and I think there's a big market for that.
Makes a lot of sense, and I think of I put myself in the shoes of, like, our listeners too, and many of them find themselves, a leader at an engineering organization, they're experimenting with AI workflows, trying to help their engineers have a better developer experience, be more productive, remove friction. And Elizabeth, I know that you also your background includes working, very closely with engineering teams and engineering managers. I'm wondering what advice you would give to those folks for how they should go about exploring this problem, because for many of them the accessibility of starting with a specialized model approach, no matter how much institutional knowledge they're sitting on, might be very daunting. And but I'm just wondering if you see opportunities for them to ultimately work with off the shelf models along with their own data, or eventually moving towards the specialized intelligence approach you've said. How do they really, get started with the kind of tools that are available to them these days, you think?
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely some options out there, and then there's, for example, on our platform, we have certain free trial period for use of certain APIs. Like, go play around with different options like contextuals, see how they like it. But I would say they can also just experiment with that versus out of the box. I would say honestly, out of the box again, it's only gonna get you so far, and you're gonna probably have to dedicate a lot of resources to that, so that's an option. That is an option, but it depends on the size of your company, the number of use cases. But you can consider, working with a company like Contextual. Again, you just have to weigh the pros and cons. For some people too, if it's a very simple use case, maybe accuracy isn't that important. Maybe something out of the box will work great. And then in terms of working collaboratively as an AI leader with engineering leaders, yes, I've definitely done that. And then I've also worked even on the software engineering side in big data myself, which I think is very valuable again to have that full stack, full perspective. But I think it's very important to try to communicate and understand the other perspective as much as possible and kind of explain where you're coming from, because and work together with the engineering leader to say, hey, this solution has these pros and cons, this cost associated, this has this, here's the first sequence of experiments we should try, and let's work together with the software engineering team and with the applied research or applied ML team, and come to a conclusion on where what kind of roadmap. And then definitely starting with those initial small scoped experiments, in my opinion, that's the best way to go.
So starting with small, repeatable experiments that have a reason. You see, was it good? Was it bad? You do the vibe check along the way, and ultimately, you're working with a team of engineers, and you said you spoke to, you understand this very well as an engineering manager, someone who is an engineering leader. That ultimately everyone just wants to write good code, ship good software, right? And they want to try to use new tools to do that better, faster, and safer. So it's about trying to roll that out and kind of like pilot programs, and don't obviously overload your teams with tools that, they're all trying at the same time, because then it's hard to measure what's really working and what's not, right?
Right, and it does, especially these days with the fast pace, it does get a little challenging because, um, there's the people from the research perspective, like myself, who more typically slam more the side of let's experiment, let's try this new technology, let's try this new model. But those folks need to be also grounded, you could say, in the fact that, hey, no, this model uses a crazy amount of memory and GPUs, and the code is strung together. So that's why the partnership with engineering, and then even for myself again, because I do have some perspective of both sides of things, trying to help bridge the gap and collaborate and come to a common conclusion is helpful. It can be hard too because if on the research team, it's more about like innovation, prototyping, not so much about writing production ready code. So that's why really clearly like partnering with people who love to write that robust product ready, well tested code is critical. And while also just being flexible to stop point, I think that's what's helped me too, is just having people on my team try, maybe experiment with some of the things that the other team is doing, or at least observe what they're doing. Oh, this is what it's like to train a model. This is why this case
Mhm.
doesn't work and you can't just fix it. Or, oh, this is what it's like to write some production code. Let me try to write some code in the system. And I found actually what I had, because I've had people on my team who are like very strong engineers or very strong researchers, and then more people in the middle. But when I had those people who were kind of like on the opposite sides of things, especially those with like a great growth mindset who want to learn, I found that when they kind of experience the other side of things, and it also helps them to understand. The only trick there is it has to be a balance because, for example, in my current team, I work with our platform software engineering team, and they're like really brilliant engineers. And so sometimes my team, we do have engineering knowledge, so we can debug something. But you have to think, okay, how much are we going to, and then how much are we going to ask them for their help? And
Right.
then my strategy on that is, at least in good faith, put some time in, look at the log, send over a log, share what you've tried, shared what you think the next steps are. And then also the other team will feel, hey, this person actually tried to look into it. Though again, sometimes time doesn't permit that. It's like, hey, we need this now. There's an outage, like help us. Which, it and then on the opposite side, like, hey, there's an accuracy issue in the model. We need it fixed now, kind of thing.
That's a good call out about the idea of like as an engineering practitioner, you can practice, you can do it, you can apply it, you can try it yourself before you try to pull in other folks. And what you do in that case is you're creating this culture of learning where folks in the organization are learning things outside of their immediate team scope and their responsibilities. And I think that's ultimately one of the biggest benefits of having like an applied research team and folks who specialize in that is they're able to connect all of those dots between the engineers and the
Yeah.
silos in which they operate, right?
Mhm.
And in doing so, you build a culture of learning. And I'm curious from your perspective, what are opportunities you see now for engineering, maybe like new engineers or people who are trying to level up to become those engineering leaders, managers, someone like yourself? What kind of skills do you think are most important these days?
Yeah, so just to follow up on what you just said first, I think that is absolutely critical to have that growth mindset and that openness to help where needed and work together. But I also just wanted to say that that has its pitfalls too. That's
Mhm.
my natural style, and I think collaborative teams do the best. But it's also, you have to be careful because I have had people in my team working on projects completely outside their area of expertise. And it can be like, okay, how long is this person going to spend on this for the good of the team and the company? No, there's different reasons for that. So you have to be careful there. Now, in terms of growth, being a applied researcher and having the perspective of both like software engineering and ML or an MLE, and how you reach a leadership level there, I would say honestly, when you're really new, just be really good at your job, do your best, and then as you start to feel more comfortable, think about how you can start solving problems for more people, bring people together, whatever your talent is. So your talent could be you're really great at architecture, so you really take the lead there. Or your talent could be you're really great at collaboration, so you focus on bringing everyone together, getting everyone the common ground in order to solve a problem. Or your talent could be you're really good at um, like, you have, strong skills in debugging. So then you could take the fact that you have those skills, plus you have ML background, and then be able to debug across the full stack, and then maybe, teach others. And then I think for any job, it's all, like, sort of a matter of, like, do the job before you're promoted. But you should talk to your manager probably about how you could do that, or your mentor. So one way is, and then usually if they're amenable to that, like they want to help you grow to what you want to do. If not, probably you should start like looking for somewhere where you can eventually grow. But
Right.
one thing I do is I'll give people side projects. So a lot of people might want to get into a specific research topic. And I'll be like, okay, well, just focus on delivering, but then 25% of your time, see how you can apply this here. And then often that can help them level up. And then another thing is I feel like in startups is you really make your own opportunities. So startups,
Yeah.
they're growing like crazy. There's opportunities available. So try not to think in terms of restrictions like I don't have this title, so I can't do this. Just think, okay, I'm good in this area. I think this can help. But within that, I mean, talk to your manager, talk to your team. Don't just go and like, well, I'm just going to come up with this new project and not get it approved. It can't be like that. But if it's a side project, most likely it will, I would say. And then I think that's probably the way to go. Also, I think just being open-minded for those opportunities that come to you and just thinking if it's a good opportunity for growth within your company or externally.
Yeah, it's like understanding your impact and what your impact can be. I love how you called out how in a startup, make your own opportunities. I think that's completely true. Folks who experience a lot of success and growth within a startup are the ones that can market themselves and the impact they have on the day to day really well. And that requires obviously being deeply familiar with the problem that your company is solving and being really close to those critical conversations that are happening every day, whether you're a part of them or not, like just understanding how it's shaping, and then thinking about how can my impact tie back to that, and doing so in a way where you don't tank your current expectations for
Yes.
what you are there to do, because it's great to be curious, it's great to want to grow, but if you're there to perform a specific function, you have to, first and foremost, make sure you fulfill your function because your company is relying on you in that way. So it's like a good bit of nuanced advice, but it really calls out how you should be focused on understanding, what's the core thing that my company is trying to do right now, and what is available in my skill set in my wheelhouse to get us a little bit closer to that goal. And then once you do it and you start working on it, it's about explaining to people about, like, this is what I tried, this is what worked, this is what didn't, this got me a little closer. We're all stumbling in the dark trying to figure out, where the light switches so we can see everything. This is me trying to get that direction. And so it's kind of it's helpful to understand it from your perspective too, as someone who bridges both like the theoretical and the practical world. I can't think of a better perspective to draw upon to kind of connect those dots for us. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I kind of want to round things out too, because we've covered a lot of really great ground here, about grounded research and about generalized and specialized intelligence, but also about your career and how you've moved through these types of roles and in these kinds of environments to ultimately take the theoretical, research minded approach and apply it into solutions, software, and applications that are shaping our world. And you're doing it at big companies, like you touched a bit about, like, working on Copilot, being a part of Apple Health. These are tools that literally everyone has used, and
Mm.
so the impact level that you've had is really great, and we're really, happy to have gotten to a little bit of an understanding of how you work as an applied researcher. But before we wrap up, where can our audience go to learn a little bit more about contextual AI and what you do, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so you can definitely go to our company website, and we also have pretty active social media on LinkedIn, Twitter as well. Just search for Contextual AI, and then because, as we mentioned, the leaders of the company are part of the original RAG team. Our
Right.
CEO is one of the co-authors and a professor at Stanford. He was interviewed recently, so yeah, feel free to check out anything about our company, or send me a LinkedIn message. I do get quite a lot, but I'll try to reply if you have a question.
Yes, yes. Please reach out to Elizabeth on LinkedIn. You should definitely give us a shout out if you listen to this episode there. Dev Interrupted posts every week. We're going to be sharing clips of this conversation with Elizabeth there as well, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on what we discussed today. So, for those listening, thanks for joining us this far. Be sure to rate and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us on Dev Interrupted.
Thank you.